Coming up on this episode of Colonial Crossfire, the impeachment inquiry goes public, coming to a TV near you. A key case is heard before the Supreme Court, putting the bench's ideological split into question. And Hong Kong streets erupt in protest. Independence or no independence? Joining us on the left, Andrew SUGRUE and Keith Nagy. And on the right, Grace Middenswey and Josh Kuttner. And I'm your moderator, MYCHAEL SCHNELL. From the GWTV studios in Washington, D.C., this is Colonial Crossfire. Hello, GW political junkies, and welcome to another episode of Colonial Crossfire. Now, it's been quite the month here in the district. First off, impeachment. It erupted. House members traded closed-door depositions for public testimonies, taking the investigation of President Trump's dealings with Ukraine into homes across the country. The Supreme Court also saw some action when oral arguments began for the case looking into the president's efforts to terminate the Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals program, commonly known as DACA. This specific case raising key questions about the current ideological split on the bench. Are there any safe Democratic or Republican justices anymore? We'll tackle that in a little bit. And, of course, with the fifth Democratic debate now in the rearview mirror, some 2020 talk. But before diving into those conversations, take a look at our headline segment to get caught up on all the other important news that happened this month, available on our Facebook and YouTube pages, both at GWTV. Now, to tackle all these hot issues, our fantastic panel of fellow GW students. On the left, Andrew SUGRUE, a sophomore from Westchester, New York, majoring in political science and international affairs. Andrew is a member of the GW College Democrats. And Keith Nagy, a sophomore from Topeka, Kansas, studying political science. Keith is the director of political affairs for the DC College Democrats, and he's a candidate for president of the GW College Democrats. And on the right, Grace Middenswey, an undecided freshman from North Arlington, New Jersey. Grace is a member of the GW College Republicans Political Affairs Committee. And Josh Kuttner, a junior from Somerset, New Jersey, studying political science. Josh is the director of political affairs for the GW College Republicans. Thank you all for being with us this morning. First topic on our list, impeachment. When we last broadcasted, the impeachment inquiry was just starting to heat up with a series of closed-door depositions. Well, certainly a lot has changed since then. On Thursday of last week, Congress left for Thanksgiving recess. But before fleeing the city, they held 17 closed-door depositions for over 100 hours in the SCIF and heard from 12 key witnesses over the course of 5 days in the public impeachment hearings before the House Intelligence Committee. Lots of questions were asked, some were answered, but a lot still loom. So with that, let's jump right in. President Trump was invited by top Democrats to testify before the House Intel Committee in a public setting. Do you think, Josh, we'll go to you first, do you think he should testify in this public setting, possibly bring any exculpatory information? Do you think it would be a smart move for the president to go under oath?
Well, sure. I think that the invitation was to appear in public or to submit written testimony, and I think that it would be fair for the president to release his side of the story in written form. I'd be worried about the potential for a perjury trap if he were to appear publicly. I don't think he'd get away with retelling a parody of what happened. He would need to be clear about, the story, and I would just be sure. I think it's fine to have him submit in writing. I think that.
So I want to ask a question about that. So the House has recently opened up an investigation into President Trump's written remarks, written answers for the Mueller investigation for possible perjury. He's already being investigated for those written answers. Do you think it's smart for him to go down that road again?
Well, like I said, I was about to say, I think transparency and oversight are fundamental portions of our American system of checks and balances, and I think it's fair for the Congress to request written testimony from the president, given how deeply involved he is there. And I think he's got, full team of White House counsel, personal lawyers, that submitting full testimony shouldn't be a problem.
Andrew, what do you think? Is this a smart move for the president to testify publicly?
A smart move for the president? No, I don't think so. I think if there were any exculpatory evidence that the president had, it would have been blanketing the airways by now. And let's be clear, I mean, this is not a partisan take or a controversial take. The president is known to lie pretty habitually. You brought up the concept of a perjury trap. I think, yeah, if he were to testify publicly or even in writing, there would be a strong chance that he would, as you said, deliver some kind of a parody or embellish or otherwise distort the truth to the extent that it could be legally problematic for him. So I don't think it would be a smart move for the president to testify, but I think the fact that it's not a smart move for the president to testify says more about the president than it does about House Democrats.
Do you think, though, that his remarks, his side of the story, should be included in the inquiry?
Absolutely. I think that, in any kind of investigation, be it political like impeachment or legal, the subject of the investigation or the procedure should have the right to lay out their side of the story. But the Republicans have been laying out Trump's side of the story pretty extensively in these hearings. So it's not like Trump's side of the story has gotten no bandwidth, no oxygen whatsoever. I do think he should have the right to present his side of the story in the ultimate sort of iteration of the hearings and of the final House vote, but I think we definitely have heard from him quite a bit.
So now we're going to move on looking at, and Keith, we're going to go to you first, looking into a specific testimony that was during former Ukrainian Ambassador Marie Yovanovitch's, her public testimony. During that time, in the beginning, President Trump tweeted, quote, "Everywhere Marie Yovanovitch went turned bad. She started off in Somalia. How did that go? Fast forward to Ukraine, where the new Ukrainian president spoke unfavorably about her in my second phone call with him. It is a U.S. president's absolute right to appoint ambassadors." Chairman Schiff, as we probably saw, read the tweet in real time, getting reaction. He called it witness intimidation. Yovanovitch said, quote, "It was very intimidating." I don't want to know if you think that this is witness intimidation or if it isn't, but what do you think this says about the president's perceived, presumed innocence or guilt in this inquiry?
So let's be really clear. This is 100% witness intimidation. When you have the most powerful man in the world tweeting at you while you're testifying before Congress, he is indeed trying to intimidate you. Marie Yovanovitch is a patriot. She should not face that kind of scrutiny from somebody as high up as Donald Trump. I believe that if Donald Trump is tweeting at this level during a testimony, it says something about his innocence. He should let the facts speak for himself, and it's another reason why he should actually go under oath. His advisors certainly don't want him to because, as Andrew mentioned, we do have a compulsive liar in the office. But this is what's right under a standard impeachment investigation.
Grace, what does it say about the president's presumed innocence or guilt?
In this system nowadays, it's guilty until proven innocent. I feel like he needs to go out there and lay his side of the story and really prove his innocence to
But a better question would be,
Okay.
do you think that the president tweeting during the testimony and, like some say, witness intimidation, do you think that says more that he's guilty and he feels the need to attack the witness, or do you think he's innocent and he feels strong enough to sort of defend himself in this inquiry?
I feel like he's strong enough to defend himself. I mean, Marie is a government employee. It's her job to perform, and if he's getting bad reviews on her multiple times, I mean, I think it's his right to, decide who's going to work and who's not going to work.
And I think the way that President Trump would view this, I'm not saying this the way I believe it, is he has consistently said when he feels like he is being attacked, which I suppose he feels that way about her testimony, that he is going to hit back and that he'll never be afraid to hit back. And so I think that's the angle he's coming from, that he isn't going to follow these norms, whether you agree with that or not. That's kind of what his argument would be there, I think.
But let's be clear, these are ad hominem attacks. He's not attacking the substance of her argument. He's attacking the person, Marie Yovanovitch, based on her record as a past ambassador to Somalia and to Ukraine. And I think we also should recognize that basically President Trump is not he's not, this notion that he's guilty until proven innocent is not correct. He has admitted on camera that he did have a conversation with the president of Ukraine saying that he was encouraging an investigation into the Bidens. That is plain, outright colluding with a foreign government. This is just the facts.
So we're going to touch on that right now when we look into another key witness's testimony. So one of the Democrats' key witnesses, both behind closed doors and in the public setting, was Gordon Sondland, the U.S. ambassador to the European Union and a large supporter of President Trump. But to the chagrin of the House Republicans, Sondland flipped on the president, answering a key question the Dems have been on the hunt for. Take a listen.
I know that members of this committee frequently frame these complicated issues in the form of a simple question. Was there a quid pro quo? As I testified previously, with regard to the requested White House call and the White House meeting, the answer is yes.
So during this entire impeachment inquiry, the Democrats have been on a hunt and talking about this one phrase, quid pro quo. They've been looking for a first-hand witness to admit that there was a quid pro quo. Sondland did, and he is indeed a first-hand witness. However, it doesn't seem like this has swayed many of the opinions of Republicans when this is what Democrats have been banking on. That said, what do you think would have to happen, if anything, if it's possible, for a Republican to flip in this impeachment inquiry? Andrew, we'll go to you first.
Honestly, I'm really not sure what it would take to flip the Republicans in the House. Obviously, if public opinion were to start to flag against the president, then I believe House Republicans would abandon him like that. There would be not even a question. He would just have all political support lost. I do think it's important to note, though, important to be, look at the facts strictly. Gordon Sondland basically flip-flopped on himself a few separate times throughout this entire process. I do not think Democrats should really put all of their eggs in the Gordon Sondland basket. He has contradicted himself. He's revised his testimony many times when it appeared to be legally convenient for him to do so. But I think that the grand totality of witnesses Democrats have summoned, the grand totality of evidence that they've gathered, paints an absolutely damning picture of Donald Trump's efforts to get Ukraine to interfere in the upcoming election by withholding aid on the condition that the Bidens be investigated by Ukraine. I think
is there a response from the other side?
Well, I think the answer to this kind of what would it take a Republican to flip kind of gets back to that quote you just played. This whole thing isn't a cut and dry question of is there a quid pro quo or not. There's a lot of information here, so that's why we're gathering all this testimony, all the facts. And I think I'd like to kind of associate myself with what we saw Congressman Will Hurd say, very experienced former CIA operative, one of the most moderate members of our party on the Intel Committee, and he kind of said, the impeachment is the ultimate, most severe level of accountability you can apply to a president, and there needs to be more clarity in order for, especially Republicans, but really for any member of Congress to be able to say that that ultimate level of accountability, impeachment of the president, should be taken.
So we're running out of time, so I want to move on to another really interesting factor in this impeachment inquiry. Last week during her weekly presser, Speaker Pelosi had said that she does not plan, and top Democrats do not plan, on waiting for the courts to finish looking at the subpoenas of Acting Chief of Staff Mick Mulvaney, Secretary of State Mike Pompeo, and former National Security Advisor John Bolton. That means that Nancy Pelosi doesn't think that the Democrats should wait for the courts to figure out if those three individuals should appear in a public testimony setting, because it will take too long. Do you think that Pelosi and the Democrats are making the right decision here? How important are those testimonies, or is it more important to wrap up the inquiry quickly with 2020 just around the corner? What do you guys think on the right first?
I believe that we should be wrapping up this impeachment inquiry. I mean, we don't know what further evidence is going to come forward. We don't know what's going to happen with this. And with 2020 coming around the corner, I think it's really important for the Democrats and the Republicans to focus on this upcoming race.
On the Democrats, how important are these three testimonies, or are they not that important?
So, if I may, I think that the Democrats already have a solid case for impeachment right now. We have this man, through his own transcript that he released, saying that he was indeed asking the president of Ukraine to investigate a political opponent, and this actually is not quid pro quo, this is extortion. He was going to withhold aid from Ukraine if they did not investigate the Bidens.
Understood, but do you think that it's more important to get these three testimonies or to wrap it up quickly?
I think it should be wrapped up quickly. I agree with my colleague on the other side that this process should not be elongated for political purposes. This is strictly a legal issue. The American people want the facts concisely. We should not drag this out and make this a campaign issue. This should be about making sure the president is held accountable.
So you don't think that the inquiry would be incomplete without these three key testimonies?
I don't know what sort of information Mick Mulvaney would have that we don't already have. I think the evidence against the president is already so damning. I'm not sure what that information would be.
All right, and now for a final question. Of course, the Congress will decide whether the president is impeached or not in the House and in the Senate. But a lot of the times what people say what matters most is the court of public opinion. And finally, the public was able to see these testimonies as they were publicly transpired before the House Intel Committee. Do you think that the series of 12 individuals we saw in a public setting, 5 days of 7 hearings, do you think that those have changed public opinion in any way? Whoever wants to take it first.
So, I mean, if we look at the average of, Donald Trump's approval rating over the last couple of weeks, it's dipped a little bit. But an interesting phenomenon of Donald Trump is that people seem to have made up their minds as to whether they like him or not. And it seems as though rather than one particular testimony being sort of the nail in the coffin for Donald Trump's approval rating, if it were to slide, if he were to lose public support, it would be just the grand totality, the whole entire impeachment process. And I think it's too early to tell if that's necessarily going to be the case, but I think that it's important to bear in mind how the court of public opinion in this process is very, very different than it has been in previous impeachment processes. I'm not, there was a quote, I don't know who said it, I can't recall, but someone basically said, if Richard Nixon had Fox News, he would have served out his second term. I firmly believe that I'm not, necessarily going to, stand here and rag on Fox News for a couple minutes, but I think that the polarization of our country at this point has led a lot of people to have knee-jerk support for Donald Trump. But, some have knee-jerk support for Democrats too, but specifically to Donald Trump, I think there are a lot of people who, and especially in Congress, who will support him even when an objective assessment of the facts suggests that they should not.
Josh, I see you last.
I think
we'll
you
give
hit
you the last
the, you hit the, I won't sit here and rag on MSNBC either, so don't worry. But I think you hit the nail on the head that people's opinion on impeachment, unfortunately, is very tied to whether they already dislike the president or they already love the president. And the only place there's really room for wiggle maybe is in the middle. And you have seen in recent days the support for impeachment amongst independents go down somewhat. Now, whether that'll hold, I don't know. And I think where most Americans have come out on this and where I'm starting to go on this is, again, to invoke what Congressman Hurd's shared in his questioning, that this is troubling precedent to set. It's not the right public policy methods that the president should be going about. But as far as impeaching the president goes, I don't know that that would be the right method of accountability here.
We're going to have to close the impeachment conversation there. We have more topics to get to. But after this, we'll take you to a new segment we like to call News from the Nine, straight from the highest court in the land. Stay tuned.
And this is GWTV.
Nailed that. Good job, guys.
Welcome back. Changing course a bit, let's move from Capitol Hill to the Supreme Court and discuss some news from the Nine. On November 12th, oral arguments began in the case looking at President Trump's efforts to terminate the immigration plan known as DACA. DACA, of course, is an Obama-era project that's intended to protect immigrants who were brought to the United States as children. Way back when, on September 5th, 2017, President Trump announced his plans to scale back on DACA, putting the lives of several hundreds of thousands of dreamers, those who are here illegally, who were brought in as children, at risk. Now, as I mentioned, the Supreme Court is reviewing a case investigating whether or not President Trump acted within his administrative powers when rolling back on the program. But, I mean, who cares, right? Republicans have a 5-4 majority in the court, so it'll be a clear win for the president, won't it be? Well, not so fast, not necessarily, as we're seeing a bit of an ideological blur on the bench. But first, let's start with the actual DACA case. Andrew, we'll go to you first. Do you think that the Trump administration has the constitutional right to scale back on DACA?
The Trump administration, DACA was an executive order. Just from a pure legal standpoint, yeah, the Trump administration has a right to rescind executive orders. I think that it is an utterly immoral decision to do so. And it's looking like the legal case they've made to the Supreme Court is very shaky. But looking at it from a moral standpoint, look, there are a ton of problems our country has. Not a single one of those problems is a kid our age who was brought across the border, not of their own volition, at 3 months old or something like that, is an upstanding member of our society, of our civic nation. Like, look, that's a precondition for being accepted to DACA, that you're not haven't committed crimes, you haven't done anything like that. These are individuals who are in school. These are individuals that are contributing to society. And look, there are very few issues that are benefited by framing them in stark moral terms, but I think this is one of them.
I'm going to move on. On the right, what's your response? Do you think that the president has the constitutional right to withdraw?
Well, Grace and I were talking before the show, actually. We have peers here at GW who benefit from this DACA program. We have friends who are DACA recipients. And by and large, you see bipartisan support for this program, that these people are, as you said, disproportionately upstanding members of society, and they should be protected. There is legal question as to whether the DACA rollout as done by the Obama administration is constitutional. To set new public policy like that with the stroke of the president's pen, I think we've had problems with that in the Trump administration too, with too broad executive action. I think that's a fair criticism across party lines over the past two administrations. But I do think I can see clear signs of where we can make bipartisan progress here. There should be a legislative solution to this issue. I do think constitutionally there's a case that it shouldn't have been done through the executive branch.
All
I
right,
can jump in here real quick.
go for it.
Okay. So the only reason that it had to be issued by executive order is because, you know, not to be partisan, but Republicans would not play ball. When the DREAM Act was being worked on, it was Republicans who refused to vote for it and allow it to be passed into law. Obama's executive order was a last-ditch effort to make sure that these kids our age, were protected. We're not sent back to crime-ridden countries which they had no recollection or memory of. And so I think that's incredibly important. I also think leadership comes from the top. I think, yeah, there should be a legislative solution, but leadership in the Republican Party is coming from Trump and the Trump administration. The Trump administration has shown no willingness whatsoever to make any moves on this, which is incredibly disturbing.
So I want to jump in with another point now. At one point, President Trump said DACA recipients would be, quote, safe. A time later, he's now moving to terminate the program. What does this say about President Trump's stance and handle on immigration issues? There are almost 700,000 DACA recipients in this country. Josh, like you mentioned, some of them are our peers. Where are these 700,000 people going to go? What does this say about Trump's handle on the issue? I'll throw it to the Republicans first.
Well, you know, I would just say, to kind of respond to your points, there were mistakes, sure, made by our members of our party in Congress not dealing with this legislatively. I don't think the solution to dealing with that problem is to enact unconstitutional executive orders. I think that the solution is leadership from the top to broker a deal of some kind across party lines. Now, whether President Trump has embodied that consistent leadership from the top that we need to have a deal here, I don't know. But he has stated that he wants Congress to act to solve this through a legislative compromise. So
What
hopefully we will see.
do you think a legislative compromise would look like?
Well, I think what we're seeing here is potential for DACA to be enshrined into law and some sort of border security measures be combined. I think it's important that we don't use, again, our peers as bargaining chips for anything too absurd to ask for, but I think border security is something that Democrats do say they support, so it shouldn't be anything too controversial to
Keith,
partner
your
with.
response?
Going back to your point about President Trump ensuring that these DACA recipients would be safe, this president also said that he would protect LGBTQ individuals. We can see that the president doesn't always say what he's going to do. For this legislative compromise, we cannot compromise on the human rights of hundreds of thousands of individuals, many of which are our fellow students. We cannot, I think that Josh has the right point, that we should enshrine DACA into law. When you talk about border security, I think we should talk a little bit more about what that means. I don't think it should mean some useless wall that we're going to spend millions of taxpayer dollars on and jeopardize our diplomatic relations with Mexico with. When we talk about border security, let's actually talk about facilitating a pathway to citizenship, hiring more immigration justices to make the process get faster and to get these people in safer and more efficiently.
So now I want to take a step back and not just look at DACA, but look at the entire makeup of the bench, of the Supreme Court. Like I mentioned before, there seems to be sort of an ideological blur on the bench, being that Chief Justice Roberts has turned into sort of a swing vote. We just saw this summer with the citizenship question, he sided with the Democrats. So sources are saying, reports are saying that right now John Roberts is a bit unsure of how he will rule on this DACA case. What does it say about the bench? What does it say about the time we are currently living in that John Roberts, who's supposed to be a staunch Republican, key Republican vote, is now siding with the Democrats a lot and questioning his stance? Does this have anything to say about maybe his perspectives are changing, which is totally allowed, or does this have to say about the Trump era we're living in and the inability for him to be able to side with the Trump era ideology? What do you got? Josh, I see you shaking your head.
Yeah, I wouldn't attribute this necessarily to Roberts wavering on whether the president, whether DACA itself was constitutional in the first place. But I think there's legal questions in this specific case about the specific rollback of DACA, the steps that the administration has to take in order to roll back a policy like that, there's certain statutory requirements that may not have been met in this rollout case. I'll let the justices, Ivy League educated, very smart, much more educated on this.
GW is pretty good.
I'm doing my best.
You're on GW TV.
But you know, I think there's legal questions here that kind of speak to the uneasiness.
And that is why they're looking at this court case in particular. But I'm talking about not just DACA. I'm talking about a bird's eye view of the whole. We've seen Justice Roberts become more of a swing vote, and we've seen the perspectives of some justices change a bit on the bench. Do you think this has anything to attribute to the current era we're living in, or are people just taking different perspectives on certain issues, which they are absolutely entitled to?
I can only guess. I would think it's more of the latter. Justices have always tended to change over their course in the time as they gain more experience, but I could leave it to anyone else to jump in.
So I think that looking at it from, like you said, in terms of the context of the Trump era, the judiciary has been repeatedly besieged by the Trump administration. It's evident that Trump doesn't understand why we have a judiciary to check and balance the presidency. And if you look at even public statements that John Roberts has made, he said, we do not have Republican or Democratic justices, we just have justices. Chief Justice Roberts, as the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court, look, the Chief Justice is always going to have one eye looking at not only his own legacy or her own legacy, but on the legacy and the longevity and the legitimacy of the Supreme Court. I think that John Roberts is going to have a lot on his mind in terms of trying to make it abundantly clear that the judiciary will not roll over in the face of the president, and that the judiciary will retain its important role in calling balls and strikes in terms of the law.
Keith, I saw you raising your hand really quickly if you want to add in.
Yeah, just to go off of Andrew's point, Justice Roberts definitely wants to end this narrative that the court is a purely counter-majoritarian institution now. He wants to ensure people that it's not going to be consistently making conservative calls just because there is a 5-4 majority by Republican-appointed justices. And Justice Roberts has actually a very long record of being the swing vote on the Supreme Court, going back to 2010, I believe it was, when he upheld the individual mandate for the ACA. So this is somebody who can, in some instances, put judicial or ideological preferences aside and purely look at the law.
Grace, any last words?
I believe that Justice John Roberts, he has the right to change his opinion over time. I mean, justices, they're not supposed to be Democrat or Republican. They're supposed to do their jobs and interpret the law in the right way. And if his opinions are changing over time, then that's perfectly valid. He's just improving his skill within the bench and trying to make this country even better.
Fair points, great conversation, awesome discourse, and that'll be the last word with that segment. But after this break, it's rapid fire. Stay with us.
Do you want to just practice fake headlines, do our anchor voices?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah?
Okay.
On this week's episode of G Week, there is another election scandal.
And former Vice Provost Peter Kay has been spotted back on campus rocking a brand new bandana. Boy, does he look sharp.
And this year's Spring Fling performer is anticipated to be none other than the Cash Me Outside girl, Behad Behabi.
Catch all this and more on G Week.
Yeah, this is stuff that would probably happen at GW.
Yeah, I think so too.
Our panel joins us again now for rapid fire. Some quick answers to some quick questions. And first off, the 2020 elections. Right now, we are less than 70 days away from the Iowa caucuses. February 3rd, 2020 is the one we're all counting down to. And in preparation for what will be a historic day, the Democratic candidates are still battling it out on the debate stage, most recently last week in Atlanta, Georgia. Now this time around, I don't want to ask about the specific plans, the differences between Medicare for All and Medicare for All who want it, and the Affordable Care Act 2.0. Yes, absolutely, that's all very important. But let's discuss the current makeup of the field, the size, and if it's effective. Right now, we're entrenched in an impeachment inquiry, yet Iowa is just around the corner, and there are still 17 Democrats running for the nomination. My question is, do you think candidates who are polling 10 points behind the leaders, do you think they're serving an effective role in running? Or is it good that they're bringing in more perspectives, or are they taking away from the possibility of rallying behind a candidate? Meanwhile, all the candidates on the Democratic field, most of them have said that their main policy issue is to take President Trump out of office. Isn't it the best way and the smartest way and the most promising way to ensure he doesn't spend another term in the White House, voting him out? Andrew, what do you think?
So, I mean, I think the size of our field is generally a good thing. We've had more perspectives brought to the table, people of more backgrounds than in any Democratic or any presidential field in history. I think that's a fantastic thing. But I think we are approaching Iowa. I think that the candidates who are polling very low should have a gut check and realize, look, I'm not going to win this thing. It's time to step out. It's time to realize that my time of making my voice heard in a very important way has come to a conclusion. But I think that the fact that we have such a large field is not a liability in any way, shape, or form.
Keith, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, like, GW College Democrats is very encouraging of various perspectives. I love to see the diversity of our ideological spectrum. But at the end of the day, I do believe that we need to narrow this field down. People who are polling 1% of the stage are not going to win. But we should embrace a competitive competition of ideas. Barack Obama just said recently, people who are worried about a competitive primary should calm down because I myself had a competitive primary. I think that's what we need to be embracing right now.
Grace, what are you thinking here?
I think that the large Democratic field comes with its advantages and disadvantages. I like the advantages. It's causing all of the candidates to really check themselves and check out what they're doing, really, come and attack each other, and in a good way to really focus on their policy. Really focus on policy. And a disadvantage, it doesn't help the Republicans because we're still trying to figure out who we need to beat in 2020. The big field, people need to start dropping out, and the Democrats need to find their front runner, and they need to start backing that front runner. So it'll make the Republicans' lives a little easier when we're trying to figure out what we're going to do for 2020.
Josh, what's your thought on the opposing field?
Well, it's really interesting because we had a really large field in 2016. But with this one, not only do you have upwards of 16, 17 people still in the race after we've already had a few dropouts, you have more people entering now, Deval Patrick and Michael Bloomberg. The field's still growing.
It won't
and we're
stop.
almost 2 months away from the Iowa caucuses, so it's pretty extraordinary. Look, if I was one of the lower candidates at this point, if I've appeared in a debate, I've made my case for a cabinet position. If I'm someone who's trying to fill up the moderate lane, I'm worried that I'm detracting from Joe Biden's potential win nomination. If I'm someone who wants the party to move left, I'd be worried that I'm preventing Elizabeth Warren from becoming the front runner. So if I was someone lower down, I would look at the vision for the party moving forward rather than my own personal candidacy.
Interesting. I don't even know if the party right now has a vision. It seems like there are so many conflicting viewpoints, but another conversation for another time. Moving on now, on November 16th, Roger Stone, Republican strategist and longtime ally of President Trump, was found guilty on 5 counts of lying to investigators, 1 count of obstructing a congressional probe, that probe being an investigation looking into Russia's interference in the 2016 election, and 1 count of witness tampering. All of these verdicts were unanimous, and they were determined in a trial that lasted just over a week. Now, my question is, what does this mean for the president? Will President Trump be forced to pardon Stone? What about the fact that House investigators are now looking into President Trump's written responses in the Mueller investigation? And stepping away from those specifics, Stone was a confidant of President Trump. Stone is now guilty. What effect, what reflection will this have on President Trump? Josh, you first.
Well, the president's not forced to pardon anyone, and I don't think he should pardon Mr. Stone. I think, unfortunately, we've seen through decades, the entire history of our country, both sides of the aisle, unfortunately, you have people who work their way into power who don't always have the best intentions. I think it's clear that Roger Stone has shown a long historic record of not telling the truth, and it finally caught up to him. And in my opinion, in terms of his involvement in the party, just good riddance.
Grace?
I believe what Roger Stone did was wrong, and I don't believe that it's President Trump's job to pardon him. I mean, as what Josh was saying, Roger Stone has had a very long history of lying and being manipulative within the party and to different candidates, and he got what was coming for him for a really long time. So,
Keith?
Like Josh said, the former chairman of GW College Republicans is an especially infamous and polarizing figure. I think that the truth finally caught up to him. And I
He
think
was the chairman of College Republicans?
he was. John Olds told me that, actually.
I'm not even going to ask you guys for a response.
Cannot confirm or deny.
That's what Roger said.
Fact check team, take a look at that one.
But I think
Go
this does
on.
follow a trend of Trump's inner circle being found guilty of these high crimes. Paul Manafort is in prison right now. I think it's eventually going to catch up to the president as well.
Andrew, last thought.
So, like, look, you could fill a school bus with all of the Trump aides who have pled guilty or have been found guilty in proceedings that have been related to Trump's campaign. You've got not only Roger Stone, but you've got Rick Gates, you've got Paul Manafort, you've got Michael Flynn, George Papadopoulos. At a certain point, when looking at the fact that Donald Trump was surrounded by these people who have engaged in criminal conduct, the reflection, to get back to your question, it reflects very poorly upon President Trump. And I think the House is absolutely right to be looking into that, because when there's that much smoke, there's probably fire.
All right, moving on now to our last topic, where in Hong Kong, protests have erupted in the streets after individuals have been protesting for their independence from the home country, China. Speaker Pelosi signed a bill expressing support for the Hong Kong protesters, sending that legislation to President Trump's desk for a final signature. But the monkey wrench in this entire saga, the president's relationship with China and President Xi. President Trump is in negotiations with China for a trade deal, so questions are looming regarding whether or not he will sign the bill. What effect do you think, if any, President Trump's current negotiations with China will have on his possibility of signing this bill and the protests in Hong Kong? Keith, we'll go to you first.
Right, so DC College Democrats has been working in conjunction with Catholic University of America to ensure that we do demonstrate our support for the people of Hong Kong. The fight that they are wagering is one that needs to be fought. I don't exactly know all the implications of how this is going to affect trade negotiations. I think that this trade war that he's got us into is disastrous to begin with. I think that at the end of the day, he needs to recognize that people in my home state of Kansas are suffering. These are the people who elected him to the Oval Office.
Allow me to rephrase quickly. The protests in Hong Kong are over the democracy for Hong Kong to grant their independence for China. The United States is a beacon of democracy. They were the world leaders when it comes to democracy. President Trump is possibly going to hold up his support for another democratic country to take form because of this looming trade deal. So the crux of the question I want to get to is it more important for President Trump to keep his trade negotiations in mind or to keep another democratic nation developing in mind?
Oh, let's be very clear. The development of democracy abroad is far more important. The development of human rights abroad is far more important than any sort of economic trade deal. Even though that trade deal is going to impact the economy of the United States and the global economy. But those two things go hand in hand.
Andrew, care to add?
Look, Xi Jinping is not a good actor here. Xi Jinping is not on the side of democracy. Xi Jinping is not on the side of Donald Trump, as much as Donald Trump would like to himself believe that and have the American people believe that. What we are seeing is the brutal suppression of a democratic movement. These people protesting are people our age, mostly college students, and they're being met with rubber bullets and tear gas, and there's honest-to-God fears of another Tiananmen Square happening in Hong Kong as these protests continue to be suppressed. It is absolutely incumbent upon the United States as the leader of the free world, as a beacon for liberty and democracy throughout the world, to support these people, to support their fight for democracy, and to oppose China's efforts to impose authoritarianism in Hong Kong and around the world.
Grace, your thoughts here?
I believe that we should be promoting democracy over in Hong Kong, but I also believe that we need to keep our trade relations with China on good terms. So it's going to be a really difficult balance for President Trump to find when we're trying to figure out this Hong Kong situation. I mean, the bill that was passed, I believe it came with bipartisan support, and I know that it's one of our American values is to promote democracy. So I really do believe that that's a really important factor in this, and I believe that everything that's happened to those college students over in China is incredibly terrible, and I never wish to see that ever happen to any type of student.
Josh, last word in the conversation.
Well, you definitely can't view geopolitical issues in isolation, so you do have to factor in trade negotiations as well as national security concerns in any of these assessments. These are complicated issues, but just to add on, I know that we have college students, people our age there, and quite frankly, it's inspirational to see them. They wave the American flag because of what our nation and our movement has symbolized. I think it's important that we always symbolize freedom and liberty around the globe.
Absolutely. All right. We'll have to end things there. Andrew SUGRUE, Keith Nagy, Grace Middenswide, Josh Kuttner, thank you guys so much for joining us. Really fun conversation. When we come back, Willow Hassan has our debate fact check. Stay with us.
Hi, Colonials. Did you know there are hundreds of ways for you to volunteer with GW? Each year, over 1,500 alumni, parents, and friends contribute thousands of hours to make our community stronger. There are countless ways you can volunteer, so it's easy to choose an opportunity that is most meaningful to you, like connecting with students and alumni based on your student involvement, identity, or personal interests, getting involved with your local alumni network, mentoring a current student via our online mentoring platform, connecting with prospective students through undergraduate admissions opportunities, serving on an industry network leadership council, becoming a social media ambassador. The list goes on. No matter where you are in the world or how much time you have to give, you can connect and volunteer with GW. And the best part, it's easy to get involved. Just visit alumni.gwu.edu/volunteer to learn more about these and other opportunities. Because of your service to GW, you are able to make a direct impact on the lives of former, current, and future students. We look forward to working with you. Raise high.
Welcome back. During our panel discussion, a team of fact checkers monitor our debate. Willow Hassan is here to fill us in on what we missed. Willow?
Thanks, Michael. Our debaters came prepared for today's conversation with very few errors. However, some clarifications need to be made. Democrat Andrew SUGRUE said that the Trump administration has made no moves to protect DACA. Trump has offered protection for DACA recipients in exchange for wall funding, so technically he has attempted to protect DACA. Democrat NAGY said that Roger Stone was the chairman of GW College Republicans. Our fact-check team was unable to confirm if Stone did indeed hold this position, but it is worth noting that we could confirm he was the president of the District of Columbia Young Republicans. For context, Stone attended GW for 2 years of undergrad. And that's all for the fact-check. Back to you, Michael.
Thanks, Willow. All right, well, that's all for this episode of Colonial Crossfire. Be sure to check us out online at www.gw-tv.com and follow us on Twitter and Instagram and like us on Facebook. And if you have strong political beliefs and would like to voice them to the GW community, please reach out to the Crossfire team via email or social media. We'd love to have you on the show. And on a more somber note, today's episode is the last episode of the academic year for our geniuses behind the glass, the amazing and intelligent executive producers, Izzy Cassandra Newsome and Haley Oland. Both Izzy and Haley are studying abroad next semester, Izzy in London and Haley in Florence. Izzy, maybe some broadcasts from across the pond to keep us updated on Brexit. However, we will miss them dearly, but are excited for them to have a fantastic semester abroad. Izzy and Haley will be back in the fall, have no fear. But in the meantime, a big shout out to Kate Waters and Mia Schlitt, who are moving up in the Crossfire world as senior producers. A lot to look forward to there. And one last thing before we go, a happy Thanksgiving, happy holidays, and a happy New Year from our Crossfire family to yours. This holiday season, I don't know about you, but I'm wishing for a little more bipartisanship in the country. For crying out loud, we are the United States of America. We're a country of democracy, a country of truth, and a country of strength, regardless of party. But most of all, we're a country that is far stronger when we're united and together. And on that note, for all of us here at GWTV, I'm Michael SCHNELL. Thanks for getting caught in the crossfire with us. We'll see you right back here in 2020.